factor. I think a lot of people who put in the new government, other than Winston, were expecting a lot more tangible things to happen rather than a lot of arm waving and promises, and that seems to be what we've been getting certainly in the last few weeks.
All right, and that's where we'll leave that discussion, but interesting thoughts from you both. One more important story on the panel. What will the weather be like? It got hot and then it got a bit ugly, and forecaster Richard Green is joining us. Hello, Richard.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jim. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and it's been miserable in Canterbury, hasn't it? Is it?
Oh, please, don't even start me. It has. It's been, in fact, I've been here 25, 30 years and can't remember a lead up to Christmas like this that much of Canterbury has seen in the last few weeks. It feels like we can't shake spring, and quite chilly down here too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but looking good for Christmas Day. In fact, one of the best parts of the country come Christmas Day, so at least we can skite about something.
Sorry, I missed the last part of what someone was saying. So one of the best parts of Christmas Day is what?
It's Canterbury, so we can skite about something because it looks like
it's
only in mid-20s, so we're going to make up for it a little bit.
But not further north?
No, not so flash further north. What we've got is this, it's like a river of moisture really to the north of the country, and as we edge closer to the big day, Jim, it wants to start to move across the North Island. So it's looking pretty damp, particularly the far north, and then as Christmas Day sort of rolls on, it starts to deteriorate elsewhere as well. And that's at this stage. The funniest thing, or what's been quite complicated lately, a lot of the computer modelling, they haven't been in agreement. So it's flip-flopping, it's going back and forth quite a bit. So we haven't got that consistency yet, and I don't think we'll have a great idea, probably until Sunday, of pinpointing exactly what's going to be happening, especially across the North Island.
All right. So I was going to ask you where the places to be for Christmas Day, apart from Christchurch, are going to be, but it's a bit early to say.
Yeah, maybe, but I would go with, say, Central Otago, in Mackenzie Country. So South Island certainly versus the North Island. I'd definitely go for the mainland at this stage. And inland areas, also parts of Canterbury, even further south into Southland as well, looking very, very nice. Further north, Wellington, okay. But as I say, it deteriorates, it seems to be at this stage as the day continues on. So enjoy it in the morning, perhaps, as much as you can.
What about people, just a final thing, what about people camping or heading out along the Great Walks? Are they, by and large, do you think, going to have a decent Christmas or not?
Yeah, well, if we're talking southern walks, yes. Northern walks, I'd be concerned because it might hang around for 2 or 3 days. So just keep an eye on the forecast for that. Places like Coromandel, for example, Northland, other parts of Bay of Plenty, Central North Island, yeah. I'd be just keeping an eye on the skies if you're doing a little bit of that over Christmas time.
Lovely,
yes,
Richard.
But where would the media be at this time of year if it didn't have those great coverage of weather stories, flooded campsites, barbecues wrecked, soaking wet pets, in the caravan. It's great stuff.
Richard Green, thank you and for that forecast. And we've got to go. My last regular day on the panel. We've got our Christmas Eve special on Monday afternoon down by the harbour in Auckland. And thank you so much, by the way, for joining the audience and helping us build it to where it is today. Thank you even more if you were here from the beginning of the panel, which of course continues with Wallace Chapman in 2019. And I hope that new year starts well for you. We'll see you on Sunday mornings. And Ruth and Jock, thank you for being on my last one.
Thank you. It was an honour.
And Merry Christmas.
All the best to you, Jim, and your new challenges.
Lovely,
cheers.
Thank you. And here is Checkpoint.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, New Zealand joins the UK and US in naming and shaming China over state-sponsored attempts to hack and grab commercial intellectual property and intelligence. China hits back saying the allegations are slanderous. The Grinch that stole Christmas is actually a drone causing calamity at London's Gatwick airport, grounding countless passengers. And beneficiaries are still paying back thousands in debts racked up while staying in emergency accommodation following bogus meth evictions. And we've got a little bit of Christmas cuteness for you that's escaped the roasting dish. Don't forget, you can watch us on Facebook or Face TV Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. It's been revealed Immigration New Zealand was tipped off 6 years ago by Customs that Karel Schrubeck had returned home to the Czech Republic in 2009. But this crucial piece of evidence was only uncovered when officials were compiling an official information release for journalists dumped late on the Friday before Christmas. Here's our political editor Jane Patterson.
The Immigration Minister Ian Galloway came under heavy criticism after allowing Schrubeck to stay despite his criminal convictions and gang connections, a decision that's now been reversed. But the customs tip-off never made it into the file on which the minister based his original decision. Even after collating documents for an investigation ordered by the minister, it was only uncovered in the OIA release. It's important because Schrubeck claimed he'd be in physical danger if he returned to the Czech Republic. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
People living near a large rubbish fire on the outskirts of Fielding are being told to disconnect their rainwater tanks until further notice and close their windows to prevent smoke getting into their homes. The landowner had a consent to burn clean fill, however a significant pile of non-clean fill had caught fire, which will be investigated. The Mid-Central Medical Officer of Health, Dr Robert Ware, says there is a chance that wind changes over the next few days may cause the smoke plume to drift over the township of Fielding. He says the smoke may irritate eyes, nose, the throat and airways. More than 1,400 vehicles with tow bars inspected by Auckland-based certifier Patrick Chew have had their safety certifications removed. The Transport Agency says Mr Chew was using the wrong assessment standard when he checked the vehicles, which means the tow bars were incorrectly deemed safe. The vehicles with the tow bars include trucks, motorhomes and vans. The agency's managing partner, Steve Hazard, says there is a risk that trailers could detach from the vehicles. Mr Hazard is urging anyone who had their tow bar checked by Patrick Chew to have it reassessed by another certifier. The Ministry of Transport has found no evidence of flaws in the design or safety of Mitsubishi Fuso buses after 3 fatal crashes. They happened in the space of just 2 weeks in July and August this year. Ben Strang reports.
The Transport Agency says the design of the Mitsubishi Fuso is not deficient, and Transport Minister Phil Twyford says he hopes that reassures bus users. The police are still investigating the crashes in Taranaki and Manawatu, but say there is no evidence of a mechanical failure in the first Mount Ruapehu crash and that no criminal charges will be laid. Ruapehu Alpine Lifts, which operated the bus, voluntarily handed in their passenger licence after the crash. The agency says there's no link between the 3 crashes and heavy vehicle specialist certifiers or other certification agents being investigated by the agency. The Mitsubishi Fuso is the second most common bus in New Zealand. This is Ben Strang.
British police are describing a drone scare near London's Gatwick airport as a deliberate act of disruption. The airport has been closed for more than 24 hours due to repeated sightings of 2 drones flying close to the airport runway. More than 100,000 passengers have had their travel plans disrupted as the hunt for the drone operator continues. Detective Superintendent Jason Tingley says tracking down the devices is difficult.
We've learned a hell of a lot in the last 24 hours. This is new territory for us, so we are doing our very best in terms of that capability and those tactical options to deal with this issue, and we do have the support of a number of agencies.
Jason Tingley from British Police. The Army has been deployed to help with the situation, and authorities say it's still not clear when the airport will reopen. The government's inquiry into Operation Burnham will be mostly held behind closed doors. The inquiry is in response to serious allegations against the New Zealand Defence Force over their conduct in Afghanistan, made by the journalist Nicky Hager in his book Hit and Run. Sir Terence Arnold and Sir Geoffrey Palmer, who are running the inquiry, have today released details on how the process will work. They say while they want the inquiry to be transparent, much of the evidence will not be made public for safety reasons. Only parts of the inquiry where classified documents aren't discussed will be open to the public, and all witnesses' evidence will be taken in closed hearings. The inquiry heads say it could be the most complex ever held in New Zealand because much of the evidence and many of the witnesses need to be kept confidential. It's 5 past 5. Sport, the former US Open champion Michael Campbell is coming out of retirement to play in the New Zealand Golf Open in Queenstown in February. The 49-year-old hasn't played competitively for 3 years, but intends to play on the US PGA Senior Tour for golfers over 50 next year. Campbell is one of 3 New Zealanders to have won a major, beating Tiger Woods to win the US Open in 2005. After a successful year, New Zealand tennis player Michael Venus has been confirmed for next year's ASB Classic tournament with new South African partner Raven Klaasen. Venus and Klaasen won their first ATP title together in Marseille, reached another 3 finals, including their best result of the season, advancing to the Wimbledon finals only to go down to world number 1s Mike Bryan and Jack Sock. Venus says at 31 years old he feels he's playing the best tennis of his career.
I'm continually working on things and things are getting better in that. So, it is exciting. I'm definitely getting older though, and I can tell in the morning sometimes the body's not as fresh as it used to be, but everything feels good, and, I'm enjoying being on court and where my game is at right now and where I'm hoping it to get to.
Michael Venus. The Breakers host the Illawarra Hawks in Hamilton tonight as they seek to build on their last round win over the Cairns Taipans. The Breakers sit in 7th in the 8-team competition, with the Hawks just 1 spot above them. The 2 sides haven't met this season, but the last time they played one another, the Hawks overcame a 16.3 quarter time deficit to win 84-82. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life goes old-school arable farming on the Canterbury Plains. Anika Moore is our Friday Night Live act. We catch up with the battle to be the most subscribed channel on YouTube between PewDiePie and T-Series with an expert 12-year-old gamer Charlie Cuff. He knows what they are. And because the solstice is just a few hours away, there's a bumper Sonic Tonic dedicated to summer on Nights after the headlines at 6:30 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, isolated showers today. Periods of rain tomorrow, possibly heavy. Auckland and Coromandel, isolated showers. Cloud increasing tomorrow and showers becoming widespread towards evening. Waikato to Manawatu, including the Central High Country, also Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Scattered showers today, some heavy and possibly thundery. Generally fine tomorrow with isolated showers inland. Kapiti to Wellington, also Wairarapa upper, cloudy at times with a few showers, clearing tomorrow afternoon or evening. For Nelson and Marlborough, scattered showers mainly afternoon and evening, some heavy and possibly thundery today. Canterbury, showers today, some heavy with possible thunderstorms, cloudy periods tomorrow, then periods of rain from afternoon, possibly heavy and thundery. From Bulla to Fiordland, a few showers, some may be heavy about Bulla today. Otago and Southland, occasional showers, some heavy, with possible afternoon thunderstorms about Otago. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional showers. It's exactly 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. And for those listening on the radio, you're not getting the full splendour of Katrina's headdress, which is Christmas themed and features 2 bobbing snowmen. Yep. I'm Lisa Owen, by the way. We'll be with you for the next hour. At least a dozen countries, including New Zealand, have been hacked by a group led by 2 Chinese nationals who've been arrested in the United States. And New Zealand spy agency, the GCSB, has established a link between the pair and the Chinese government. The Chinese embassy in New Zealand hasn't responded to RNZ's calls or emails, but overseas media say Beijing has rejected the economic espionage allegations, describing them as slanderous. New Zealand officials have formally expressed the country's disappointment to China and are also waiting to hear back. Here's political reporter Gia Garrick.
New Zealanders' data hasn't been compromised, the GCSB says, but managed service providers have been. These are organisations that provide technology services such as internet access, email services or call centres to companies which operate in New Zealand. The head of the agency, Andrew Hampton, says the GCSB has come out quite aggressively on this matter because it undermines international agreements and affects global stability.
New Zealand depends on a rule-based order. We depend on a open, secure, safe cyberspace, and these types of campaigns are quite contrary to that.
But the minister responsible for the country's spy agencies, Andrew Little, says it's not cause for New Zealanders to panic about their data.
Although a couple of MSPs were hit, it didn't compromise their services, didn't stop any New Zealand client of theirs from getting their services safely and as securely as possible. What it did show is that there is vulnerability And that's why it's important that all network owners and network service providers make sure that they have the top-notch cybersecurity that we've got to have in this day and age.
The hackers Zhu Hua and Zhang Shilong have been part of a hacking group in China known as Advanced Persistent Threat 10, or the APT-10 group, since at least 2006, and acted in association with the Chinese Ministry of State Security, the American FBI has found. They're facing a raft of heavy charges in the US: conspiracy to commit computer intrusions, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Their link to the Chinese government hasn't come as a huge surprise to Andrew Little.
Russia has an outfit set up specifically for cyber attacks. North Korea obviously has a track record internationally made now of having done this. Some Middle Eastern countries are doing it. It's no surprise that China has this too. This is now a modern form of, you might say, sort of warfare.
The arrests have seen the FBI director, Christopher Wray, accuse China of plundering some of America's most valuable commodities, including trade secrets, over the past decade.
No country poses a broader, more severe, long-term threat to our nation's economy and cyber infrastructure than China. China's goal, simply put, is to replace the U.S. as the world's leading superpower, and they're using illegal methods to get there.
New Zealand's relationship with China could also be on rocky ground. However, the Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters hasn't responded to requests for comment today. Revelations of China's state-sponsored hacking comes on the back of a decision by New Zealand to block Chinese tech company Huawei from being involved in the rollout of the new 5G data network. The GCSB cited security reasons, following similar decisions by Australia and the United States. Huawei's chief financial officer was later arrested in Canada, wanted on extradition to the United States, which has further escalated tensions between Beijing and Washington. Relationships between the two superpowers are being described as on very thin ice. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Gia Garrick.
And Andrew Little joins us now on the line from New Plymouth. Minister, is this an act of war?
Well, the incursion was on the part of China, as many intelligence agencies have now established, when their state-backed outfit went after various computer networks, information networks, exfiltrated information, and potentially caused damage to a range of companies and organisations. So that's the kind of the hostile act. But agencies around the world got to keep up with this stuff. They see it, they investigate it, they verify it. And on this occasion, a number of countries, I think 20 or 21 now, have established that China has been doing this. It's been state-backed, and we've got to call it out.
So the FBI says this is about China wanting to replace America as the world's superpower. I mean, how do you see it? What do you think the motivation is?
Look, it's not for me to comment on those sorts of claims or tensions. The reality is China is a very powerful country. It's a country with whom we've enjoyed very good relations over many years, over many decades, a country that we have a very strong trade relationship with. That continues, but equally, it's a country that is getting into some activity that potentially compromises the interests of businesses and citizens in New Zealand. Our responsibility as a government is we've got to be abreast of that. We have agencies like the GCSB to monitor what is happening to networks. They've done that, and they've identified that this activity is happening. Even though we have a very good relationship with China on very many fronts, we also have to be big enough and bold enough to call this out when we see it.
So what are you doing about it besides calling it out?
Well, I mean, what we do is we keep abreast of it, we see it, and then when we know it's happening and can verify it, we say that. And we go to China or the Chinese representatives and we say, we know this is happening, this is unacceptable, and we want to make sure that our relationship with you as a country is based on positive relationships. Where there are disagreements over genuine matters of policy, we'll say that, but we should not be engaging in the kind of activity under the radar, slightly sabotage type activity that is not healthy for good relations between two countries.
So it's just a telling off, in essence?
Well, it's we know that a country like China, like many countries, have their intelligence agencies. They are using their intelligence agencies to do stuff like going in behind everybody's back and trying to create incursions into computer networks, into infrastructure, and obtain information without anybody's consent. That is a hostile act. It's not acceptable in a relationship. the best you can do is let them know that we know that, call it out publicly. They've got to have to answer for themselves at some point. But that's what we can do, and we are doing it.
Are they the only ones doing that?
No, and we've called out, as a government in a country, we've called out Russia before doing this in the Not Picture campaign a couple of years ago. We've called out North Korea. We know that Iran is responsible for these sorts of incursions. This is not just China. This happens. One of the biggest vulnerabilities of any country and of any private sector now is the threat to networks, to information networks, and that's why the challenge of keeping abreast of the threats and having counter technology to keep up with it and defend networks and data and people's personal information is absolutely vital. That is the big challenge of the modern age.
Minister, quickly before you go, is this us taking sides with America?
No, we do our own investigations and our own verification. Part of the process is we talk to other countries, obviously our Five Eyes partners, but other countries as well, like the European countries who have been part of the attribution today. So we're talking to a lot of people, a lot of countries. We've got to look after our citizens and our people's interests. That's what we do, and we make a judgment about what we say and do about things based on what is in our interest.
Thank you for joining us. That is Andrew Little, the Minister responsible for the GCSB. The Army and Police are hunting for the operator of 2 drones which have caused travel chaos at Britain's second biggest airport. The airport's been closed for more than 24 hours and authorities say it could be at least another 8 to 12 hours before it reopens as more drone activity has been reported. More than 110,000 passengers have been affected. The Army has been called in to help with the incident, which has been described as a deliberate act of disruption. The BBC's Duncan Kennedy has been at Gatwick and has this report.
These are unprecedented scenes at a major British airport. Thousands of people grounded because of a drone. Gatwick's destination board was peppered with cancellation signs. The queues of passengers waiting to depart stretched for more than 100 metres across the concourse. Some people did make it onto planes, only to be told they were not taking off.
This is probably about as bad as it gets here, so my apologies. Thank you for bearing with us. Okay, thank you.
Nicola Bastian and her partner Mohammed from London spent 8 hours on a plane with their 15-month-old daughter before being told it was cancelled.
We didn't even get out the plane. They didn't let us out or nothing. We were stuck on the plane for 8 hours. So
with a baby?
With a baby. And we now have no luggage, which has all our Christmas presents in and everything.
Well, we've heard stories like that of the misery and disruption this has caused all day long here at Gatwick. And by the end of today, something like 800 flights will have been cancelled or delayed, involving 100,000 passengers. Police spent all day searching for the drone and its operator. A team of armed officers was seen near the perimeter fence, though it's not clear if officers have been given orders to shoot at the drone. They're among dozens trying to locate the drone.
Each time we believe we get close to the operator, the drone disappears. When we look to reopen the airfield, the drone reappears. So I'm absolutely convinced it's a deliberate act to disrupt Gatwick Airport.
Tonight, the government announced that the military would be stepping in to help the police at Gatwick. The misery has continued all day for families like the Palmers from Kent. It was meant to be a surprise pre-Christmas flight to Lapland.
The children wasn't told until today, and of course it had all been cancelled.
It would have been a really nice experience, but obviously someone has to go and spoil it for everyone.
Britain's second airport has been the target of this incident for 24 hours. A major international flying hub brought to a standstill by a device no bigger than a dustbin lid.
And that was Duncan Kennedy on the ongoing chaos at London's Gatwick Airport. People are still paying back emergency accommodation debts they racked up after they were kicked out of their state homes due to flawed meth testing. Checkpoint has been asking the Ministry of Social Development for 3 months whether it will reimburse people for the costs they incurred for living in motels after they were booted out of their state homes. Housing New Zealand announced in September it would compensate the evicted tenants, but MSD says it still hasn't decided if it will do the same. Michelle Cook has the story.
Kicked out of their homes for what has now been established as a flawed methamphetamine testing regime, many people ended up on the streets or in motels, which at the time MSD made some of them pay back. Housing New Zealand has apologised for the evictions and has now compensated 210 tenants at a total cost of $1,660,000, an average of $7,900 each. Casey McCarry, who advocated for her father, Robert Erueti, over the more than a year he spent in emergency accommodation, says it's about time MSD does the same.
Housing New Zealand has taken ownership of compensating my father and many other New Zealanders that are in the same situation. But I believe that MSD needs to come to the party and they need to take ownership and they need to take responsibility for what they've done in terms of this methamphetamine eviction. And they need to compensate these families that have struggled through this huge crisis of not only eviction, but emergency housing.
More than $1,500 of her father's emergency accommodation costs was made recoverable, and Ms McCarry says he really struggled with the deductions coming out of his benefit. Auckland Action Against Poverty spokesperson Ricardo Menendez-March says many people ended up with debts to MSD through no fault of their own.
Most of the tenants have yet to be found a home, and many are still paying money back to the ministry. Giving people $8,000 for something that put them in the streets, that made them accrue thousands of dollars to the Ministry of Social Development and debt is simply not enough. I do think the government needs to be looking beyond the initial cash sum if they're genuinely looking to deliver justice to the people affected because of the meth testing regime.
For 3 months now, MSD has been telling Checkpoint the same story, that it is reviewing files to establish how much people owe, have paid, and are still repaying for the debts they incurred. It has been working through a list of 782 tenants provided by Housing New Zealand and knows there are 566 people who may have a debt. MSD wouldn't give Checkpoint an interview, but its Deputy Chief Executive Service Delivery, Viv Rickard, says in a statement,
"We know people are worried about debt they may have incurred as a direct result of their Housing New Zealand tenancies ending because of meth contamination, and we want to assure them we're working on addressing this soon."
Mr Rickard says determining the level of debt people might have is a complex process. Ricardo Menendez-March says that's an excuse and it's really just a matter of resourcing.
Every person filed with the ministry has a record of the grants that were given to them and the payments that have been made. So it is a matter of the ministry not wanting to put their resources and a team to find out exactly how much money people have been paying back over the years and how much debt they still have. I don't think it's an acceptable answer to say that it is too complex when they've got it in the system.
The Ministry of Social Development says it will be advising ministers in the new year about the overall impact and the steps it can take to address it. It says once a decision has been made, it will act as quickly as possible. For Checkpoint, this is Michelle Cook.
There's yet more upheaval in the Trump administration, although it does seem like we've been saying that quite a lot this year. The US Defence Secretary General James Mattis is quitting his job after clashing with the president. His departure comes after Donald Trump announced the withdrawal of US troops from Syria, despite opposition from US allies, top military officials and many senior Republicans. General Mattis joins a long list of senior figures who have either quit or been removed. Zachary Goldman reports.
U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis will step down at the end of February, saying in a letter on Thursday that his views do not line up with those of the president. Mattis's resignation letter stressing the importance of America's network of alliances in the face of rising threats from Russia and China. Quote, "My views on treating allies with respect and also being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors are strongly held and informed by more than 4 decades of immersion in these issues." And going on to tell the president, quote, "Because you have the right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these and other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position." The resignation coming a day after President Donald Trump declared he would withdraw all U.S. troops from Syria, saying the mission against Islamic State was complete.
Now we've won.
It's time to come back.
A sudden reversal of Pentagon policy, and one that did not seem to have the support of Mattis.
We're going to defeat ISIS. You have seen us stay true to that mission, and we are going to make certain that we defeat them, and that means you don't just turn around that moment and say, okay, we're gone, and we all know that.
Mattis and Trump were also at odds over deployments in Afghanistan, where Trump likewise wanted to bring American soldiers home. But Mattis and others successfully pressed him to stick with a 17-year effort to defeat the Taliban. Mattis is perhaps the highest profile and longest-serving appointee in a Trump cabinet beset by resignations, departures, and firings since the president took office. Mattis, along with former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster and outgoing Chief of Staff John Kelly, were often described as a triumvirate of Trump's generals. Men with distinguished military careers viewed as a steadying hand on a chaotic administration. Mattis will remain in the job until February to help ensure an easy transition. The White House has not yet named a replacement.
For all of you still contemplating your festive fare, lamb this cute and expensive is off the menu. We're talking about the very distinctive looking Valais black nose sheep, a Swiss breed farmed by a handful of breeders in New Zealand. After Whited Upper breeder Christine Reid took her flock to the Canterbury AMP show, they became a bit of a social media sensation. And just last week, a few new bundles arrived, so we couldn't resist a catch-up.
They just look cute. They look like one of the rag dolls that you might get in your child's collection of toys. And they've just got cute little black faces, little black ears, and a little white tuffet, curly locks to the front of their faces. Little black knee pads and little black feet. And if you turn them around, you can see they've got black on the tips of their back, what you call elbows, I suppose, or hocks as well. And so that's the first part of it, but the second bit is really their personalities. They have the sweetest, most endearing personalities. They're more like your family dog or family pet than they are a sheep. They're very inquisitive. They're renowned in the Swiss Alps where they're from in terms of following trampers around on the trails. They just love people company, and so they'll follow you about. They'll run up to you to see what you're up to. And just as they behave quite differently from other sheep. They're not at all stupid. They'll almost put themselves into the sheep yards when you need to do something with them, so they're never a problem.
I noticed they've got that unusual pattern, as you say, and that little tuft of hair, which looks like a perm out of the 1980s. And you've got some newbies at the moment, haven't you? How many little ones have you got?
Yeah, so we were delighted 2 weeks ago. My business partners, Lindsay and Sally Strasty from near Motueka, and I have been doing this in a joint venture. And we've just welcomed, I've had another 5 lambs born 2 weeks ago, and they've also got a similar number of lambs. We had a rather imbalance of males this time, not as many girls as we'd like, but just delighted with the quality. They are the first lambs born out of our own ewes, which we took embryos from just last year. So these are actually the second generation of ewes of lambs in New Zealand from the imported stock that we brought in, and just fabulously marked little lambs.
So how much does one of them go for? How much are they worth?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. And in the UK, where we imported them from Scotland and from Northumberland, they're still selling ewe lambs, or ewes are selling for around 10,000 New Zealand dollars each.
$10,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we estimate at the moment, the embryos cost us $2,000 each to bring into the country. And if you're lucky, half of those might successfully implant into the ewe, and then half of those, if you're lucky, might be girls. So we estimate about it costs us between $10,000 and $20,000 to get a good ewe lamb on the ground. So this is not a cheap exercise.
No,
and
Christine,
it's full of risks as well. Yes,
that's an expensive roast. 10K.
Oh well, thankfully we'll never eat these. They're too cute to eat, and they'll always be. They'll always retain their value. So they've been in the UK now for 5 years, and they're still maintaining very high prices.
So are they pets, really, then? Is that what you breed them for?
Yeah, absolutely. So they are pets. As I say, they're more like your family dog than they are a sheep. And people on lifestyle blocks really, like myself actually, just like to have something a bit different and something cute in their paddocks, not just your average run-of-the-mill sheep.
Seeing as it is the Christmas season, no special requests for starring roles in the Nativity?
Not yet, but they would make an ideal little lamb to be surrounding a manger.
You absolutely should check out those pictures on our Facebook page. Those little lambs are gorgeous. And don't forget, you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But here is Christmas Katrina with the headlines.
It's been revealed Immigration New Zealand was tipped off 6 years ago by Customs that Karel Srubeck had returned home to the Czech Republic in 2009. But the tip-off never made it into the file on which the Minister Ian Lees-Galloway made his decision to allow Srubeck to stay. The information was uncovered only in an official information release. The decision to allow the convicted drug criminal to stay caused an uproar until the minister reversed his decision. Fielding people living near a big rubbish fire are being warned to disconnect their rainwater tanks and close their windows to stop smoke getting into their houses. The landowner had consent to burn clean fill, but there was a significant pile of non-clean fill which also caught fire, and this will be investigated. The Mid-Central Medical Officer of Health is warning smoke may irritate eyes, nose, the throat and airways if smoke drifts over the town. More than 1,400 vehicles with tow bars have had their safety certifications removed. The Transport Agency says Auckland-based certifier Patrick Chew was using the wrong assessment standard when he checked the vehicles. The agency says there's a risk trailers could detach from vehicles and owners are being urged to have their vehicles rechecked. The Ministry of Transport has cleared Mitsubishi Fuso buses of design flaws after 3 fatal crashes. The Transport Minister, Phil Twyford, says he hopes this reassures bus commuters. The crashes, which happened within a fortnight in July and August, are still being investigated. British police are describing a drone scare near London's Gatwick airport as a deliberate act of disruption. The airport has been closed for more than 24 hours due to repeated sightings of 2 drones flying close to the airport runway. More than 100,000 passengers have had their travel plans disrupted as the hunt for the drone operator continues. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock, but on the radio.
Thanks, Katrina. Madison Reedy is in the studio with business. Tell us, a shareholder of a New Zealand company gets a bit of a reprimand by officials. What have they done?
This is Agria Corporation, so they're a Singapore-based firm. They were the major owner in the NZX-listed agriculture company PGG Wrightson. Now, they had to settle with the United States Securities and Exchanges Commission a couple of weeks ago in regards to some allegations around fraudulent accounting and market manipulation in America. But the OIO here, the Overseas Investment Office, them being, Agria being an offshore company that was invested in a company here, they have to pass that good character test. Now, they obviously passed that before they bought this major stake in PGG, but while this investigation was underway in the States, the OIO was watching pretty closely, and today they announced that they've actually taken their own action. So they've forced Agria Corp to reduce its stake below that major 50%. So they've now had to sell off a bit of their stake down to 46.5%. That's how much they own now of PGG. And the OIO has also applied to the High Court to possibly penalise it here as well.
Interesting. And big year for business this year. What can we expect in the new year?
It was a very large year for business news. We had the likes of Fonterra with massive losses, Fletcher Building, more losses there as well. We can expect both of those companies, kind of the ongoing fallout of that not to end, particularly in construction as well. I mean, we've also seen a number of construction liquidations. Those are not yet over. We'd expect also the fallout of those, more losses, more liquidations and insolvencies we can probably expect too. Another one that also took up a lot of our time was CBL Insurance. This was a troubled insurance firm that's now in liquidation. This entire process was started by the Reserve Bank. They started ticking them off in about February of this year. It's now still being dragged on into next year. This is an ongoing saga, and there's also been, mountains of court evidence dragged on, allegations of deliberate deceit, impropriety, and dealings with Peruvian drug kingpins. This is a massive one where things just keep turning up, so definitely expect more of that. Also also the Bank Conduct and Culture Review certainly kept us busy this year. A lot of that came out of the Reserve Bank too. It's not often that you see a regulator look under the hood of an entire industry, so that's quite telling for what we could expect in the new year as well.
Markets?
The NZX Top 50 index closed down 1% tonight, so that's a fall of 86 points to 8,686. The New Zealand dollar is buying at 67.7 US cents, 95.2 to the Australian and 53.5 British pence.
Thank you, Madison. That's Madison Reedy with Business, wearing some Christmas lights, by the way, if you're listening on radio. One of the 8 families who have reached an out-of-court settlement with the government over care for disabled relatives says it's won the battle, but not the war. The King case dates back to 2008 and involves 13 plaintiffs from 8 families who cared for their disabled child or spouse without being paid between 2002 and 2012. The case was due to be heard in the High Court next year, but has been settled this week. But as Emma Hatton reports, the families aren't popping the champagne corks just yet.
Peter Ray broke his neck and became a tetraplegic 49 years ago. His partner, Rosemary McDonald, has been his full-time carer for 20 years. Mr Ray says the confidential settlement recently reached between themselves and the Ministry of Health is a start, but he's still frustrated.
We're 3/4 of the way there. They've got to change it so family carers are treated like any other carer. Because I'm tired of the bullshit, reading their documents about the disabled person being put in the centre, giving them choice, independence and rah-rah, and it never happened.
He wants people who care for their family members to be paid a proper wage. Ms McDonald has never received a wage for looking after him, and they've been living off the supported living payment from work and income and his pension. Mr Ray says the payout will help them, but it won't change what's wrong with the system.
Rosemary won't get paid. She hasn't had the chance to save or have a Kiwi saver or, anything like that. So it's heartbreaking. It's soul-destroying because other people are getting it and you aren't.
The government's funded family care policy was introduced in 2013 after successful court cases were taken by those who care for disabled family members. It's been a costly exercise, with the series of cases costing the Crown at least $2.6 million. It has lost all 3 cases. Jane Carrigan is a disability advocate who was involved in one of those cases. She says while the settlement is good news for the handful of families involved, there's still hundreds out there who are receiving nothing.
Unfortunately, it continues to leave approximately 1,600 other families out there who also care for high and very high needs adult children in the home to continue to be on the receiving end of unlawful conduct from the Ministry of Health in their application of the funded family care policy.
Meanwhile, Ms McDonald says the current system doesn't acknowledge the burden that unpaid work places on a family.
When you know that your disability and your need for support is keeping your most trusted carer out of the paid workforce and quite often is on a benefit, you do not have the dignity of paid work, which is important. That can be a real burden for the disabled person.
Despite resolving this matter, the Crown still faces another court case next year, where it will have to defend its policy of requiring severely disabled people to employ their parents as caregivers. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
A lone Māori warden who stepped into the middle of a brawl on an Auckland train to protect other passengers says she was just doing her job and spreading some love. A video of the fight posted to social media shows Jackie Waitapu, a volunteer who rides the trains watching out for commuters, intervening as the men swing and kick at each other. She was on the 8:12 p.m. train from Britomart to Swanson on Monday when things turned a little nasty. Jackie picks up the story.
They were shaking hands previously on the platform before they went into the train, and then they just broke out into a big fight.
And doing what to each other?
Trying to punch and kick each other and whatever they could do to get at each other.
So what did you make of that and what did you do?
I just tried to intervene to calm the situation down, to stop them from fighting, to try and stop it from escalating onto the train because I had other passengers.
Yeah. Were they?
Yeah.
I saw the video and you seem to have kind of worked your way in between the two groups. Were you standing right in the middle, Jackie?
Yes, I tried to defuse the situation because that's what any other Māori warden would do too. We don't have to fight violence with violence. I need for the kids these days to learn that.
You're standing there in the middle of them. They've been trying to take a punch at each other. They're yelling and shouting. So what do you say?
Have more respect for yourself. And I was just trying to calm them down, trying to stop it from escalating.
Were you worried that they were going to take a swing at you, or you might get hit in the crossfire?
No, I don't really have any fear for my life or anything. I just didn't want them coming onto my train and causing any other trouble, or just trying to keep all the other passengers safe.
So why do you think you didn't get punched?
I don't know. Hopefully it was just because of the respect for the wātene, which is our whole cause is to aroha ki te tangata. That is our mission. Love the people. So we just try and keep everyone safe, no matter what nationality it is.
So you think it was out of respect for the Māori wardens that they kind of calmed down and didn't hurt you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was like I wasn't even in the middle of the fight. It was like they just wanted to keep going each other.
So what about the other passengers? How were they kept safe?
They were in the back of the train away from where all the fight was. We had to remove a lady who was close up to the fight just so that she could be safe, which happened to be the driver's cab, but anything for safety.
Is this all in a normal night's work for you if you're riding the trains, Jackie, or what are you doing normally on the trains?
Sometimes it's just peaceful as, and sometimes a fight could escalate. You know, we could we see all sorts on the trains, and it happens a lot. And then sometimes it's really quiet, and then out of the blue it might just happen again. You never know what you're going to get out there. But we've been on the trains for like 20 years now, and our rangatira Jack Taumanu from the Waitemata Māori Wardens, he's always told us that comes first. The people's safety and the love for the people. So that's all I was doing, just our job.
How long have you been doing it for, Jackie?
About the Rugby World Cup since then, on and off, for about 8 years.
Do you know what they were fighting about?
No, apparently one of the guys that was on my train, he said it was over $25. So it just escalated from the moment the doors opened. It just changed. They just started fighting, and it was so unexpected.
Over $25. Do you think they'd been drinking or taking any drugs or anything?
Oh, I could smell the alcohol, definitely on the two on the platform. Yeah. The ones attacking the two on the train. I could definitely smell the alcohol.
And that is Jackie Waitapu, who works as a volunteer. She is a Māori warden, and she's on the trains in the evening making sure people get to and from home safely. Thanks, Jackie. Well, they might look cute, but wallabies have the potential to be the possum problem of the 21st century. And that fear has prompted plans to create New Zealand's first national wallaby management program, which is a polite way of saying, it seems, that money is being sought to kill more of the furry animals. Our reporter Tess Brunton has the story.
Farmers, especially on the South Canterbury side of the river, some of them are spending a fortune on wallabies. You know, I know people down there that shoot 1,000 every year. They get a helicopter in and shoot 1,000 on their properties.
That's Federated Farmers North Otago President Simon Williamson. He says there are no benefits to having wallabies apart from the occasional hunter, which is also the best way to kill wallabies at the moment. But that could change by next year if the National Wallaby Management Plan, a collaboration between regional councils, government and Crown research agencies, is given the green light by Treasury. Mr Williamson welcomes the proposal, saying federated farmers have been calling for one for years. But he says there isn't an easy option.
And then once you get them down, you're always going to have certain people that are, you know, onto those last ones. But a bit like rabbits, whether you can ever eradicate wallabies, I have my doubts.
Department of Conservation Threats Technical Advisor Alistair Fairweather says New Zealand can't afford to wait.
It's estimated that wallabies could occupy up to a third of New Zealand within 50 years. So that if nothing's done to stop the spread, wallabies have the potential to be the possum problem of the 21st century.
Rivers often create natural boundaries for wallabies, but more regional councils are discovering these boundaries aren't working. Mr Fairweather says the pests can cause significant damage to farming and conservation land, which can be incredibly costly.
It's been estimated that wallabies cause approximately $28 million of economic damage every year, and at these current rates of spread, it's going to go up to $84 million in the next 10 years.
He says wallabies can no longer be considered a regional issue. They're a national problem. Mr Fairweather wouldn't give a figure for the funding pitch, but it's a multi-million-dollar 4-year proposal, which includes plans to develop military-grade thermal imaging to find wallabies in dense forest and bush. Canterbury Regional Council Biosecurity Regional Leader Graham Sullivan says its current best option for culling wallabies can't cover the territory needed.
A man with a dog, trained dog, is currently the most high-performing in terms of finding wallabies. But clearly that type of activity is not going to deliver the outcome. The coverage that a person can undertake in a day would be around 100 to 150 hectares, and we're talking thousands of hectares of high country.
And while a helicopter can cover more ground, about 1,200 hectares an hour, Graham Sullivan says the thermal imaging used isn't accurate enough yet. Already there are satellite breeding populations on the eastern bank of Lake Pukaki, near Twizel, and on the south bank of the Waitaki River, the other side of the containment zone. Without controls in place, he says they will continue to spread their burden around New Zealand. So how many wallabies are there?
You can't have a census. As I say, we're having enough trouble to detect them to knock them on the head, but the ability to actually count them and have a definitive number like that is not possible.
Bay of Plenty Regional Council Biosecurity Manager Greg Corbett says wallabies have been in the region since 1912, but they're spreading. Mr Corbett says on some farms up to 100 wallabies can be shot in a night. But he says satellite populations are hard to find and hard to kill.
It's becoming obvious to us that without national support and better coordination from other agencies, we're not going to be able to win the war of containing them.
A funding decision is expected to be announced mid-next year. For Checkpoint, Kortas Brunton, Tēnei.
Across New Zealand, more than 150 families or individuals are relying on emergency accommodation for a roof over their heads on any given day. And for people who are on Housing New Zealand's wait list for a home, a lot of Christmas stresses are multiplied by having to stay in motels. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Monroe visited a motel in South Auckland to hear about one family's stay.
This is what I'm supposed to cook on, is that.
Inside Ngāwai Cole's South Auckland motel room, things are cosy to say the least.
I have 4 children who live in this little unit with me. It's different from where I was before. I was living in a women's and children's shelter in Rotorua. But in this kind of scenario, I suppose it's a bit more squashed.
A double bed and a single bed have been pushed together. Even then, one person has to sleep on the floor.
Excuse the mess, people, please. I have no furniture and all that, so I just had a lot of bedding and clothes and just little bits and pieces, but this is all that we own.
She's been in emergency housing for the past 9 months. Most of that time she's been in Rotorua, but a few weeks ago she headed north to be closer to family.
Over here is our kitchen. And as you can see, it's pretty small. It has this little small fridge, and we can't really fit enough kai in there for me and my family. This is the bathroom, excuse the mess. I've had to add things into here just to hold things up, and because all the stuff we bought, there's no shelves or nothing in there, or no cupboards, so I've had to bring things in myself and just make it homely. But yeah, other than that, it's got what we need.
Ms Cole is paying $111 a week for her motel room, leaving her with around $250 of her benefit for her and her children.
I don't want to be in a situation with my kids. We've always had a home. I've come up here for a better life for my girls. They both started NZMA this year, or next year. I started MIT.
She's paying off a debt at $40 a week, money that's being deducted from the leftover cash.
Being in here, I've still got to try looking for rentals. My name's bad. That's why we're emergency housing, you know. There's a lot of reasons why a lot of us do it, and mine is because my name's bad and I can't get another rental. And just the fact that I can't afford one. It's a bit harder, I suppose, when you're, I don't know, trying your hardest and you're getting nowhere. You want to give up, and I think that's sometimes how I feel.
Nawai Cole was put up in this motel on the day she arrived in Auckland. She knows that's not the case for everyone.
I've met a lot of people here that are going through this situation. They can't get housing. You know, they can't get emergency housing, and some of them are old. Some of these people that I've met are old, and they keep getting chucked from place to place, and it's not right.
Of the 7 or so families we spoke to at motel units across South Auckland, 4 had been staying there for 3 months or more, with one couple going on 13 months. There were young families, toddlers, teens and pregnant women. Most didn't want to be filmed, but none of those we spoke to were looking forward to spending Christmas in their motel units.
You want to be with whānau and friends, but you can't because you live here, you know, or you can't invite them to your place because it's too small. But then I suppose when you're in a situation like this and you do come around to Christmas, that one day is joyful for you because you're not thinking about your situation. You're just thinking about the food and the presents and the laughter you're going to have. And then until that day's over, then it's back to reality for us. And I think that's what brings us most down, is the reality of this all.
The state housing waitlist leapt this year from just over 6,000 people last December to 9,500 by September. Housing New Zealand says it will have 1,100 more homes available by next Christmas, but Nawai Cole says that's not fast enough.
Sort us out, help us out, make the moves faster for us. And for those of you that are waiting, just keep waiting, don't give up. I mean, it's a long process, some people have been waiting for years, but at the end of the day, you'll be grateful when you get your house, because it'll be yours, and it'll be warm, and you can have whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, but just hold up, just wait. And Housing New Zealand, let's go. Let's get the show on the road. That's all I can say.
It'll be Christmas at the beach for Nawai Cole and her family this year, but she's hopeful next time around they'll be in a place of their own. For Checkpoint, Nita Blake-Person.
And an update to our story last night about the hundreds of people missing out on food parcels in Auckland because the City Mission didn't have enough to go around. The mission says it was able to cater to every single person today thanks to a $15,000 donation from Pack and Save and $17,000 from the Auckland District Health Board. City Missioner Chris Farrelly says every corner of the community has got behind the mission, donating whatever they can and volunteering their time. He says the donations enabled the mission to give food parcels and Christmas presents to about 1,000 families this morning. Keida Uke and Muthu Pa weren't wearing life jackets when they were swept off Flat Rock in Muriwai and drowned in July. The couple are among 82 people who have died from drowning so far in 2018, and water safety groups today launched an initiative to try and prevent further such tragedies. Matthew Tunison reports.
Muriwai's Flat Rock looks like the perfect fishing spot. It's a wide natural jetty that allows the fisher to cast into deep water and hook a hungry snapper or kahawai. But you only have to wait a few minutes to see why it has such a bad reputation. A set of larger waves comes charging in, exploding against the rock face and sweeping across the surface with awesome power. Surf Lifesaving Northern Region, Drowning Prevention Auckland and the Council chose the spot to launch a campaign to try and hammer home some key safety messages for intrepid rock fishers, key among them being to wear life jackets at all times. Rock fishing safety advisor Samuel Turbot says the all too common scenario involves people heading for a day's fishing and not expecting to get into the water.
So they're going to be sitting out there on the rocks. They're not planning to go in, so often they're not prepared to go in, so they're not wearing a life jacket, they're not wearing the ideal clothes. Yeah, they're just not really prepared for what could possibly happen. All it would take was one rogue wave to wash them in, and yeah.
He urged fishers to never turn their back on the surf.
I talked to quite an experienced fisherman out at Piha. It's a spot called Piha Flat Rock. He was literally just packing up for the day, grabbed his rod, turned around to walk back up the rocks, and rogue wave came through, washed him off the rocks, knocked his head against the rocks, scraped them all up, and he almost actually got dragged by the wave.
Harry Oanga of Drowning Prevention Auckland says latest surveys show fewer people are wearing life jackets than previously, although increased reporting may account for some of this.
18% of people going on the rocks are wearing life jackets, which is a huge drop, where it used to be roughly around 20 to 23% of people.
Ben Julian of Surf Life Saving Northern Region says it's not only people unfamiliar with New Zealand conditions that find themselves in trouble. Salty old sea dogs could also be guilty of being poorly prepared.
Yeah, I think it's one of those unfortunate situations where people never think it's going to happen to them, and there are some barriers to entry with life jackets. We're really hoping to get those costs down for the life jackets, but because people don't think it's going to happen to them, they're not taking the precautions, and that does happen to them and they're just simply not prepared.
There have been 82 drowning deaths so far in 2018. Water safety advocates are hopeful that could be zero in 2019. In Auckland, for Checkpoint, Matthew Tunison.
Let's return to a story about a theatre company in search of a stage. In the middle of the year, the Free Theatre in Christchurch was kicked out of its premises in the city's revamped arts centre. Since then, the company has been battling to survive at a time when many of the city's smallest theatre companies are struggling to find venues to perform in and are often at the mercy of established players. But with Christmas on the horizon, Free Theatre may have finally found a surprising new home. Our South Island video journalist Logan Church went to meet them.
I'm standing in the remains of the former Seven Oaks school site just south of Christchurch's CBD. Abandoned classrooms, overgrown greenhouses. It looks like the set of The Walking Dead. It's spooky. But standing here with me is Free Theatre's manager and producer Marion McCurdy. I met her when the company was told it had to leave its old venue at the Christchurch Arts Centre.
So we lost our home in the Arts Centre in July, and that was a really difficult time for us. It's been Free Theatre's home for the past 36 years. But the last few months, it's been a time of working on future projects, finding ways to move forward into the future.
They looked at all manner of potential homes and performance spaces, including rundown car parks. But that search eventually led here to the old Seven Oaks School.
So we've been doing a lot of planning, which has been a really good opportunity to find a way to how can Free Theatre survive? But a really key part of what we need is a space.
Standing in an overgrown greenhouse, Marion sees an opportunity. Free Theatre is planning a new production called Arts Acoustica, which it describes as an avant-garde theatrical music fair in the woods. Designer Stuart Lloyd Harris visualises musicians and actors performing in the greenhouses, old buildings, under trees.
If we tried to turn this into a conventional theatre, it would be nightmarishly hard, because we'd have to do all the things that you would expect, but we like to find the kind of gift of the space, and immediately we've got this amazing growth. It's waterproof, so we can be in here, and yet there's plants growing underfoot.
While the company only has a rolling monthly lease at the moment, Marion sees a bright future here, in a city where being a small company is tough.
At the moment, the funding is very much directed towards the bigger stakeholders, the bigger companies, and smaller groups such as ours are really struggling to survive. I mean, we employ one person, myself, at the moment, and so that's the challenge for a company like us that wants to create new avant-garde work. We need a home.
And having a permanent space is something Marion thinks will be a big help to the Free Theatre.
And it's perfect, first of all, for Arts Acoustica, for our next project, but we're also looking at it as a potential for a future home.
Arts Acoustica, with help from the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra, will be performed in the new year. But in the meantime, there is a lot of work to do to turn this old, dilapidated school into a theatre. In Christchurch, for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
And just enough time for some of your feedback now. Returning to our earlier story, this is the one about Chinese hackers hacking into, various countries, including New Zealand, and it has been linked to the Chinese government, so state-sponsored. Mike says China is buying us, not spying on us. And this from another texter who says, didn't the USA hack Iran's nuclear program and sabotage it some years ago? Same thing as China is doing, they say. And on the meth testing, this is a story about MSD not yet making a decision whether it's going to reimburse people for the money they spent on emergency housing after getting kicked out over the bogus meth tests. This texter, David from Otago, says, Add to personal losses incurred the loss of value to any owners of properties so assessed if they were going to try and sell their properties. And it was made all the worse, he says, by the consequent profits made by those who were in the know, who bought up the so-called meth contaminated houses and have since done very well for themselves, says David. Anyway, he says, happy Christmas and thanks to you all. And happy Christmas to you too, David, and thanks for listening. So that is pretty much it from me, Lisa Owen, and the rest of the Checkpoint team for 2018. Can you believe that the year is almost over? Thank you for joining us on your radio, your television, online, or however you chose to connect with us today. Now remember, you can catch up on our stories tonight or over summer, especially if you missed some of the ones with pictures, on rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, or they'll be on our Facebook page. And for all the latest news, information and feature stories from New Zealand and around the world, go to rnz.co.nz, the homepage there, to get your fix while we're away. From Monday though, tune in at the same time for 5 o'clock report presented by Te Anua Hurahanganui. We will be back late January. Until then, whatever you celebrate, have a fantastic summer, a safe holiday season, and we will see you next year. Good night.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batten tēnei. It's been revealed Immigration New Zealand was tipped off 6 years ago by Customs that Karel Schrubeck had returned home to the Czech Republic in 2009. This crucial piece of evidence was only uncovered when officials were compiling an official information release for journalists dumped today just before Christmas. The Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, came under heavy criticism after allowing Schrubeck to stay, despite his criminal convictions and gang connections, a decision that's been reversed. But the Customs tip-off never made it into the file on which the Minister based his original decision. Even after collating documents for an investigation ordered by the Minister, it was only uncovered in the OIA release. It's important because Schrubeck claimed he'd be in physical danger if he returned to the Czech Republic. People living near